Okay, in this video, I want to talk about something I meant to talk about in the previous video, but I forgot. But it was really important, and I want to help you understand this. So um, this channel is for non-borderlines who have been in a romantic relationship or are currently in a romantic relationship with somebody who has borderline personality disorder. We're talking full-blown borderline personality disorder, not just somebody who has borderline tendencies. If you are somebody who has borderline personality disorder, feel free to watch this. This is not a condemnation, but it will give you a better understanding of perhaps how your illness is affecting other people. Please get therapy for it so that you can feel better and be happy and cause less damage to those that you become associated with. So, as you know, borderline personality disorder is something that is caused in infancy or during toddlerhood, where there is abuse, trauma, neglect, or ambivalence, which severely impacts the psychological development and the brain development of the infant, preventing them from creating their own identity, which creates a huge chasm in their soul. And their soul is filled with chaos and emptiness and fear and anxiety. And they become emotionally arrested at whatever age they were when they experienced this trauma. This is usually in infancy. It can be as, you know, I talked to somebody who had an adopted sister who was adopted at 3 months of age. And at 3 months of age, she was adopted into a very loving, very healthy family. All of the kids that were born from those parents grew up to be very healthy, adjusted, loving people. But this infant that was brought into their house at the age of 3 months, this infant went on to develop borderline personality disorder. And so they had known that this baby had been abandoned at 3 months of age. And so that trauma arrested that child's emotional and psychological development. And so all the love in the world didn't fix it, which should tell you something. That means you're not going to be able to fix it either unless they get targeted therapy. And so underneath the surface of the seemingly fully functioning, very loving, in the beginning, very intelligent, very intuitive, beautiful person is an infant or a toddler who is filled with fear, anxiety, and is filled with a tremendous need to be loved and taken care of. Now, this toddler does not have the ability to have your best interest at heart. This toddler is not capable of thinking in the future about how to behave in ways that will protect you. This toddler does not have the ability to make commitments or to be able to think about their effects on you. All they know is that they are in pain and in need and lonely, and they need whatever it is that they are trying to scream about in order to get their needs met. So what I want to talk to you about today is how they infect you with their disease. So if this were all it is, that they were just toddlers in need of love, that would be challenging, but it wouldn't be as traumatic as it is. But the fact is, imagine this toddler never, ever getting their needs met. The end result is that toddler will get the very clear message that they have no value. So as you know, what borderlines do is they split. They go from loving you to devaluing you. And that is a really good word, because that's exactly what they do. They devalue your existence. They don't They're not trying to do it, but what they're doing is they are projecting onto you what happened to them, which means that the longer you stay with a borderline who is untreated, what will eventually happen is that they will successfully program you to believe that you have no value, that you do not exist. And so what will happen is that you will then start taking on their disease. When that happens and you become fully infected, they will discard you because you will no longer have the ability to give them what it is that they're looking for. So what they're looking for is they're looking for an identity that they can latch onto. Now, if that were enough too, if they could go, well, I'll just latch onto you and hold on to you, that would be one thing, but that's not what happens. Because at their very core, they believe on an unconscious level that they are worthless and have zero value. Understand that having no value is much worse than being a bad or unlovable person. I want you to understand that. It's not the same as a child who grows up and, whose father ends up telling them, you know what? I was more successful than you when I was your age. You'll never amount to anything. That's very damaging and that's devaluing, but that isn't the same as saying you don't exist and therefore you don't deserve any love, not because you're bad, but just because you're not there. This was the message that they received, that not only were they not lovable, but that they weren't even worthy of being noticed. So that's why they live in this empty black hole of empty nothingness. So what ends up happening is that they will take all of the love that you give them. It will not stick. It will not hold. Bear in mind, this toddler, if you pour love onto this toddler, that toddler in a week is not going to remember the love that you poured into them. This toddler may not remember in a day what you did for them. Same as an infant. An infant is probably better. Imagine pouring love onto an infant and then expecting that infant the next day to understand what you've done for them and want to pay you back. They don't have the ability to pay you back. This is why that they're sociopathic. They're sociopathic because they simply aren't developed psychologically and emotionally enough to have that kind of emotional memory to know how to give back to you. They don't know how to do it. With the woman that I was dating, I bought her a brand new computer. Weeks and weeks of taking care of her when she was going through problems, feeding her. I can't imagine. It drained me. I did everything. I totally just surrounded her with as much love as possible with the thinking that, she'll remember. And when she comes out of it, then she'll be there and, she'll be there for me when I need her. Nope. Doesn't remember any of it. Has no emotional and maybe not even any memory at all of what happened. This is what it's like to be with a borderline. But more than that, they have this deep sense of a lack of worth and that they do not exist. And so what they are doing to you, the abuse that they heap upon you when they devalue you, is to make you understand what their continuous experience of themselves is. And as I said before, once they are successful, of course, this is all happening on an unconscious level. They're not consciously planning your demise. Any more than this toddler is consciously planning the demise of, anything or anybody. They're not consciously planning your demise. But they do want to, on an unconscious level, meaning they're not aware of it, on an unconscious level, their goal is to get you to feel what they feel all the time. And when you get to that point, when you no longer have a sense of self, when you no longer feel valuable or loved, they will discard you because you will have nothing to give them. I can remember at the end of my relationship with the borderline that I was with, I remember feeling, I mean, of course, I was incredibly depressed, very sad. I was feeling insane. I felt completely alone, rejected, and unlovable. And I remember I was walking along the beach, and this beautiful woman walked by, and she looked at me and smiled. And just having a woman smile at me was shocking. And it was like, what? You're showing me some kindness, some love. It was, and I was so thirsty for it. And then later on, ran into some other people who, I had been isolating by myself. I won't get into it. And some people reached out to me and were very kind. And it was like people being kind to me and treating me with love and respect and, treating me like I had value. It's like, oh my God, that's what it's like. And it was so, I mean, it made me weep. Just normal human loving interaction where people can really make you feel like you have value, that you exist. And I realized that I had completely been infected by her disease. And again, it's more than just this little toddler who's crying out in pain. It's that little toddler is always crying and nobody listens, and or is punished every time she cries and asks for something. So the end result is she thinks she has no value. She has no worth, that she doesn't exist. If you stay with a borderline, they will infect you with this. And it can be extremely damaging to you. So, bottom line is there's nothing you can do for them. You cannot help them. You cannot fix them. They will not love you because they can't. They don't have the ability. All they have is need. They will idealize you the same way that this little toddler will idealize anybody who takes care of their needs or sees them. But the moment that they start to then dip into their identity, or what should be their identity as a result of the intimacy created from the love that they give you, then what ends up happening is that they will then be triggered by their own internal paranoia, and they will force you to experience what they experience all the time, which is being devalued. You'll experience that as when you're loving them the most, they turn on you and attack you in the most cruel, the most narcissistic, the most sociopathic way beyond your wildest imaginations. This is the insidiousness of borderline, is that they can inflict upon you damage at the deepest level that even the most brilliant, pathological, evil mind can't come up with. And that's because they are unconsciously wanting you to experience the level of pain and misery that they are having all the time. So my advice to you is to get out. As soon as you become aware, get out. If you're in it, you're a codependent, so you're going to want to stay. They're going to hoover you back in, and they will brilliantly seduce you into believing that they understood what they did, that they actually do love you, and that you should give them another chance. And then, of course, because you want that amazing love that they have, you will dive right into it and think it's going to be okay. And then before you know it, you're being devalued even worse than before. I mean, the last devaluation experience I had was I shake my head at how amazingly brilliant the disease was at pulling me in, making me drop all of my guards and make myself more emotionally vulnerable and available, and then to have that completely destroyed. I mean, again, I've never experienced that kind of abuse, and I've experienced a lot of abuse. I've never experienced that kind of psychological abuse in my entire life. So the kindest thing you can do for the borderline is to leave the relationship. Tell them that you love them, but their behavior is harmful to you and you can't have any contact with them. If they want to have contact, say, I'm happy to have contact with you after you've gotten therapy and you've been in therapy for 3 months for borderline personality disorder. After that, I would be happy to communicate with you until such time for my own health. I'm sorry, but I have to have no contact. That is the kindest thing you can do for them. All right.